In this week's video, I wanted to have a little fun for a change and look at the toughest PSA 10s from the 1970s. To find them, I analyzed PSA's population reports and found the cards that had the lowest percentage of 10s in their respective sets. I'm going to look at every set between 1970 and 1979, and for most of these sets, there are a number of cards with 0 10s, so I'll include those as well. My spreadsheet is linked below if you want to take a closer look at the data. For 1970, there are 76 cards that don't have any 10s graded. Of those, here are the cards with the most submissions. I've talked about these all-star cards before in my video in the 1970 set. They are legendary for being tough to find in a 10. For cards that have at least one 10, the Roberto Clemente and Reggie Jackson cards are ridiculous. Look at these low percentage of 10s. 0.03% is one of the lowest we're going to see in this video. 1971 is a definite outlier in the 70s because of the obvious condition sensitivity of the black borders. In fact, about 3/4 of the cards in the set don't even have a single 10 graded. Of the cards without a 10, these three represent almost 10,000 cards submitted without even a single 10. Staggering. Of the 1971 cards that do have at least one 10, these three represent the toughest ones to get, with only one copy each. For 1972 cards without a 10, the top one is no surprise. Every Hank Aaron in action I've ever seen has been off-centered. Next, we see a couple of commons, yet high-number cards, with several hundred submissions and 0 10s. I was surprised by these toughest 10s for 72. I didn't expect to see Bob Gibson and Rod Carew on the list. The Fisk is no surprise, though. About 10% of the 1973 set has no 10s. Here are the cards with the most submissions without a 10. Here's Reggie again, along with Joe Morgan and Jim Palmer. Check your own collection. These seem to fly under the radar. For the 1973 cards with at least one 10, these cards are all insanely tough. All of them have a rate of 10 at less than 1/10 of 1% of cards submitted. Here's 3 cards from the 1974 set that you might be surprised don't exist in a 10. Of the cards that do have a 10, the first one probably is not a surprise. It was card number 1 in the set. I was really intending to just have some fun with this video, but I couldn't help researching the background of some of these Pop 1 cards like this one. I've been so jaded by the hobby that I automatically question any low-pop vintage card as being either trimmed or part of the only 10s club of insiders. And wouldn't you know, this is one of those cards too. It's part of a submission of about 40 consecutive 10s for 1974 Topps from 2012, and sales data ties it to Peter Eiskowitz, one of the only 10s club members that I showed in the last video. Sorry guys, I just can't shut this brain off. Okay, so let's get back to the cards. For 1975, 2 of the cards with 0 10s were these MVP cards. The third is Bert Blyleven. These next 3 cards all have thousands of submissions between them, but there's only been 1 10 of each. These are cards that I would have thought would have more than 1 10. Anyone know why they're so tough? For 1976, here's a card that I've referenced in other videos that's legendary for being impossible to find in a 10. There are none with over 2,600 submissions. And here are a couple of other 1976 cards without 10s. Here's Hank Aaron again, 110, which is 4/100ths of 1% of the submissions. Nolan Ryan has 10 PSA 10s, but with over 5,000 submissions, his rate of 10s is very low too. The 1977 set only has a handful of commons without 10s, so I'm going to skip over those. I was really surprised to see that the card with the lowest rate of 10s is this Brothers card of George and Ken Brett. Thurman Munson and Nolan Ryan are also very tough 10s in this set too. Every card in the 1978 set has at least one example graded a 10. If you saw my video on the 9-10 ratio, you'll recognize the Eddie Murray rookie as one of the toughest 10s in the set. But it's not the toughest. Nolan Ryan has that honor. That card is actually twice as difficult to 10 as the Murray. And Paul Molitor's rookie is the 3rd toughest 10. Here are 3 1979 cards you can look for next time you go to a card shop. No 10s have ever been graded. I was really surprised when I learned about the Eckersley. This next list shouldn't be much of a surprise if you've seen my other videos. Ozzie Smith is another one of those cards that is so well known as a tough 10 due to centering. So, what's the toughest 10 of the 70s? It depends. In terms of pure numbers, I would say the 1971 Nolan Ryan, with 0 10s and over 4,600 submissions. If you think it's unfair to compare the 1971 to other sets, you could settle on the 76 George Brett, with 0 10s for 2,600 submissions. If you want to consider cards that have at least one 10 graded, these 3 cards would be on my list. Each shares a minuscule 3/100ths of 1% of 10s for all their submissions. Here's some trivia. What's the easiest 10 of the 70s? This 1979 Tom Hume, with over 47% of the cards submitted coming back at 10. What do you think is the toughest 10 of the 70s? Did I miss any? Thanks for watching.